For the residents of the quiet, orderly neighborhood of Willow Creek, Mr. Silas Vane was not a neighbor. He was a nuisance. They called him the Gadfly. Silas Vane lived alone, and his entire existence seemed dedicated to finding flaws. He was a tall, thin man who dressed in tweed jackets, even in summer, and carried a small, red notebook everywhere. At 8 a.m. he would stop the mailman. "You are 1 minute and 45 seconds later than yesterday, young man. Is the postal service degrading?" At 10 a.m., he would be at the local bakery. "Mrs. Gable, this scone is 8% smaller than the one I purchased last Tuesday. Are you adjusting your portion sizes without informing the public?" And at 7 p.m., at the Homeowners Association, HOA, meetings, he was a nightmare. David Harris, the HOA president, dreaded those meetings. Harris liked things to be smooth, quick, and polite. Silas Vane made that impossible. "Mr. Harris," Silas would interrupt, standing up so everyone had to look at him. "Regarding Agenda Item 4, the new landscaping contract, I have personally calculated the total square footage of the common area. The budget you've proposed is inflated by $2,450. Furthermore, the company you've chosen, Prestige Gardens, happens to be owned by your brother-in-law. Is this a conflict of interest?" The room would go silent. Harris would turn red. The other neighbors wouldn't look at Silas. They would look at the floor, wishing he would just sit down. He made things so uncomfortable. People actively avoided him. When he began his slow, inspecting walk down the street, neighbors would pretend to get a phone call or suddenly remember something they left inside. "He just loves to spoil the peace," David Harris often complained to his wife. "He's a bitter old man who finds joy only in ruining things for everyone else." Then one Wednesday, the peace became absolute. The mailman, walking his route, felt an unusual lightness. At first, he couldn't place it. Then he realized Mr. Vane's front door hadn't opened at 8 a.m. He hadn't been critiqued. At the bakery, Mrs. Gable served her scones without a single measurement being questioned. By evening, a few neighbors noticed the newspapers piling up on Silas's porch. David Harris, as HOA president, was called to check on him. They found Silas Vane in his study. He had passed away peacefully in his sleep, slumped over his desk. His red notebook was open. On the page was a new list. Crack in pavement, Elm Street, trip hazard. Community pool filter, last cleaned. Harris budget meeting, follow up on $2,450. The news spread. The dominant feeling in Willow Creek was not sadness. It was guilt, quickly followed by a deep, profound, and unspoken relief. "It's tragic, of course," Harris said at the next HOA meeting, performing a moment of silence. "Silas was a passionate member of our community." That meeting was the shortest and most pleasant in Willow Creek history. Harris presented the new landscaping budget. "Any questions?" he asked, scanning the room. Silence. "Excellent." He stamped the budget, approved. Everyone clapped politely. The meeting was over in 20 minutes. For the first month, Willow Creek was blissful. It was quiet, polite, harmonious. Then the slow rot began. The new landscaping company, Prestige Gardens, arrived. They did a terrible job. They planted cheap flowers that died in a week and mowed the lawn so unevenly it looked like steps. It also cost $2,450 more than it should have. A resident complained. Harris shrugged. "The budget was approved by the committee," he said smoothly. Without Silas Vane challenging her portions, Mrs. Gable's smaller scones became the new normal. The mailman, no longer timed, started delivering mail 2 hours late. Sometimes he mixed up houses. The crack in the pavement on Elm Street was not fixed. An elderly woman tripped and broke her wrist. The community pool turned a faint shade of green. The real trouble started 6 months later. David Harris proposed a special community project, a large, ornate fountain to be built at the neighborhood entrance. The cost was enormous. He presented a glossy brochure and a complex budget filled with consulting fees and administrative costs. The residents murmured. The cost seemed high. But no one had the data. No one had done the research. No one wanted to be that person. No one wanted to be the new Silas Vane. The project was approved. A year after Silas's death, Willow Creek was almost unrecognizable. The expensive fountain was half-built and already looked cheap. The roads were in disrepair. The Prestige Gardens company had been paid in full but had stopped showing up. The community funds were almost empty. The residents called an emergency meeting. This time, they weren't polite. They were furious. They yelled at David Harris. "Where did all the money go? This fountain is a joke. The old landscaping was better." Harris, cornered and sweating, finally snapped. "You all voted for it. I presented the budgets. Not one of you ever questioned me. You all sat there in silence, happy that the meetings were short." A cold silence fell over the room. It was Mrs. Gable, the baker, who finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Mr. Vane would have questioned you," she said. The entire room froze. The name they had avoided for a year hung in the air. "He would have had his red notebook," she continued. "He would have checked the costs. He would have known that the fountain contractor was your other brother-in-law. He would have stopped this." The realization was like a physical blow. Silas Vane wasn't the nuisance. He was the immune system. He was the painful, necessary sting that kept the whole body healthy. He was the gadfly who stung the lazy horse, the community, into action, forcing them to be awake and accountable. They had been so happy when the annoying buzzing stopped. They never realized that the silence that followed was not the sound of peace. It was the sound of decay.